seems to me, and I'm speaking only specifically of American Christianity at this point, but it seems like we have stopped going outside the garden completely. We've gone back inside the garden against...
Of our own making, sure.
And we're now salting the earth within it.
Yeah, well said. We're salting the earth within it. Yep.
We are trying to make sure that other Christians think our Christianity is correct, and we have forgotten about those who are not part of our theological mindset in the first place.
Yes, and we have to. So to do that properly, you have to have you have to have conviction, but your conviction should really only be in what the Bible explicitly says. Right. And if the Bible doesn't explicitly say anything, you shouldn't hold your convictions too thoroughly. You should be holding them what the Bible explicitly teaches with one arm close to the chest, and then anything else is like as far out as you can reach. I always describe it, you're holding on to it as far out as you can reach, but I always describe it as if I think of all my theological values on a table, just a big round table, and my core values are who is God, who is Jesus, what has he said, and all these things at the core. And then I've got all sorts of things that are just technically on the table because I can't either disprove them or in certain circumstances I'd be willing to do this or do that. It's just not a circumstance I'm in life. So I kind of like they're on the table. For instance, and I do this all the time theologically, a couple of years ago I'm having a conversation. Actually, this was 2.5 years ago. I'm having a conversation with a couple of guys who think that the description of the second death in Revelation is a description of annihilationism. So not souls being tortured, but
forever.
Souls being destroyed,
right? So that
and no longer existing.
Torture.
And I disagreed with them on that, but I said. But they made good enough points where I said, technically, that actually needs to be an idea on the table. But for me, for 2.5 years, it's been on the edge of the table, and I think it's going to fall off. But technically, the point that they made about it is a valid interpretive idea. So I have to hold all of these ideas on my table, and they're much more negotiable. Sometimes I think they need to be pushed off, but I can't because it's not my right to push them off. So I leave them on the table, and then they're there in the back of my minds, in the back of my hearts, but they're not the core around which I build my faith and my daily life.
And you want to be cautious that they do not infect your current ideas.
Yes, because it's so subtle,
right,
and so easy to slip into. It just kind of happens with the best of intentions and motivations anyways. And so I'm catching myself all the time thinking, oh, you know what? I probably emphasize that too much when that's a more negotiable idea. Because it's just hard when you, instead of having like one thing at the center and talking about it, you realize everything is connected and everything's like dominoes. If you talk about one thing, you ultimately end up talking about 40 things. And you have to think through 40 or 50 things and not just one thing. But if you have eternal life in the Lord, you've got time to do it. If you believe in the future of Jesus' return, he's going to set us all straight anyways. I try and think of it like this. Have you seen the BBC Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch? Many times. It's fantastic. First episode, after he's really just met Watson. And he's told Watson, Iran or Afghanistan or whatever the two places was. And they're in the taxi and he's driving back. And Watson asked him, how did you know? And he says, I didn't know, I noticed. And he explains all the things that led him to understand things from observation about Watson. Except he got one thing wrong. The watch that Watson had from Harry to John on it, he said, Watson said, that's not my brother Harry, that's my sister Harriet. Harry is short for Harriet. And he's like, sister. But Watson, but before he says that, Sherlock actually says something that tells us his humanity is still intact. He says, I didn't expect to be right about everything, so what did I get wrong? And that's where Watson says, Harry is short for Harriet. And he says, sister. That's the way that I think about it. Because no matter how many details I could be right about and valid conclusions I could come to, I still expect at the end of it, there's at least going to be one thing. And if there's one, how many other things could I be wrong about? And the only way to get better in the interpretive process is to actually look for people who will challenge your process and your thinking process as much as just your conclusions. But see, we don't tend to do that in churches, but that's exactly what all scholars have to do, because and that's why I think we need to learn this lesson. Stop divorcing scholarship and the process that they go through and we don't have to do their details, but from the local church, because they put out the stuff and it forces conversation and forces iron to sharpen iron when people from other ideas, backgrounds, even the same fields of study can look at that and say, well, let me, in light of this data piece that you didn't mention in your book or your paper or whatever, let me challenge your thesis, ideas like that. And if we are willing to have those conversations, throughout time, iron will sharpen iron, the snowball will roll down the hill, and it'll grow, and you'll be more mature. But the fundamental starting point is you have to be human enough to rethink through things. You have to be human enough to actually ask yourself, what did I get wrong, or what can I get more right, and where can I go looking for that? When we don't do that, we descend back into our own animal instinct. I think it's an animal instinct to say, our church is going to look like this and only like this, and these are the things we're going to do, and we're not going to do anything else, and all that. It helps in the short term. It helps in very unstable, chaotic moments.
Might be okay for a day.
but it shouldn't become the rule
Right.
for governing people's lifetime, because you'll enclose them behind your walls. You'll keep them stuck, and they'll never be able to grow based on what God has for them outside the walls, which could be anything. They could go off and they could do anything, which is why frontiersmen and people who go out into the unknown is the first step to the hero's journey. You have to have the call to adventure. You have to have the call to go out there and do that. And you have to accept the call. My point has always been, you can accept the call just by picking up a book and exploring ideas, listening to podcasts, listening to good teachings. You're exploring the unknown in a safe space and environment where you can ask questions and challenge ideas even within yourself. But the whole point of doing that is to ultimately challenge the actions, to come up with new expressions for it. And people come along and say, we don't want that. We had somebody actually talk to me about a week and a half ago or something. Somebody mentioned to me when you started doing WMU stuff, and then you stopped because nobody wanted to do anything different. Nobody wanted to do anything different on the Women on Missions stuff. And so you're like, well, I can't do anything. And what's the point of being in this position? I was like, I totally get that. And when a person has that idea of saying, we're not going to do anything different, this is the way we do things, then you're going to be in trouble, because ultimately that's going to corrode and die, whatever it is. And if we don't learn that lesson as a church, we're not going to be able to get the next generation back in this church again. You can think of it like that. And so we have to make peace with our animalistic fears. Well, what happens if we change? What if it's a good thing if we change?